Hello, and welcome to another episode of Clearing the Haze. I'm your host, Chuck Marting. This week, we're going to be sharing with you a episode that we did with Currently Speaking with Bill Current. And this was a podcast that was just released on his show last week, and I wanted to share it here. It was a great interview, so I hope you enjoy it.
Welcome, everyone, to another episode of Currently Speaking. I'm Bill Current, president and founder of the Current Consulting Group, and I'm going to be joined today by my very good friend, Chuck Marting. Chuck, how you doing?
I'm doing great, Bill. Thank you for having me here on the podcast again. It's an honor.
Absolutely. It's a pleasure for us. Now, before we get started, I just want to remind the audience that you can find past episodes of Currently Speaking at our website at currentconsultinggroup.com. There's an archive of past episodes. They're available for free. Go on there, watch whatever ones you want to watch, like them, share them with other people, help us increase our viewership. That's what kind of keeps the ball rolling. So we appreciate you coming on and joining us for today's episode. But go back and look at others. We did a whole series of webinars, myself and Brian Feely, who's the Senior Vice President here at the Current Consulting Group, but spent many, many years at OraSure Technologies in the oral fluid drug testing business. And so we did a whole series of like 16 episodes on various levels of oral fluid testing. So you can find those on the website as well. We have state law episodes with Yvette Baker, who's one of our attorneys that works here at Current Consulting Group. So, and we actually, Chuck and I have a past episode or two on here as well. So go look for those and help us increase our viewership. We appreciate it very much. So today, Chuck and I are going to talk about something really, really special. Chuck is now the author of a new book, Mastering the Impairment Code. And I'm going to have Chuck explain what that book is, why it's important. I've had the opportunity to read an early draft of it, which I thought was fantastic that he shared that with me. But before we do that, Chuck, tell the audience, a little bit about yourself.
All right. Well, and it kind of leads to where the book came from. Originally, I'm a retired law enforcement officer. I did that for 20 years. 18 of those years, I was what they classify as a drug recognition expert. So I was an expert witness in court in testifying to a judge, jury, or anyone else as far as what the signs of impairment are. So you would have officers that would go out and get somebody pulled over for a DUI. And they would do their investigation. They find out, well, this person's not under the influence of alcohol. Well, they would call me out to come out and make sure that there was some impairment going on. And with the training that I would have, I would be able to tell you if the individual was, one, impaired, and number two, what they were under the influence of. And then that was confirmed through drug testing. So that really became a skill that I had, that I excelled at very, very rapidly. I started teaching in the police academy, teaching other agencies, doing a lot of training, both in the state of Colorado and nationally, on just impairment. And I was looking to retire. I was looking at maybe a year or two to retire, and I had a DUI arrest one night, and this gentleman was just freaking out. And I asked him, I said, what's going on, man? The worst of this is over. We're going to release you here in a little bit. And he goes, well, I'm going to miss my pre-employment drug test. I said, well, why don't you get a mobile service or something like that can come and take care of it? And he goes, well, nobody does that. And so the lights went off in my head. I'm like, really? So I came home, and sure enough, we found that nobody in our area was doing, mobile drug testing. And so we went ahead and started the business from our kitchen table here. And it went, I figured, well, it'll give me about a year and a half. It'd be about right for me to be able to retire and go right into that. Well, my wife is pretty influential when it comes to talking to people. And she built this business to the point where she called me one day. She goes, look, we're going to need to look at you leaving sooner. And when it got to the point where she was making more in a couple hours than I was all day as a police officer, I was like, yeah, it's time to leave. So I got into this, and I was able to take what I had done in law enforcement and translate it over into the workplace. And Bill, what I was concerned about was how many employers I was coming across that didn't know what impairment looked like. They knew they were having issues, but they didn't know what to do. And so they would call me, and the bottom line is that zero tolerance doesn't work. It hasn't worked. It hasn't worked for a long time. It's punitive. It's reactionary. It's after the fact. And that's what I was seeing. And that was the answers that I was seeing a lot of these supervisors giving to their employees or their team members when they asked them, well, what's going to happen now? Well, we have zero tolerance and they'll get a hold of you on that. Well, what does that mean? So that's where the book came into play. I started looking at that, and I found that, drug and alcohol impairment in the United States costs U.S. businesses over $81 billion a year. That is a staggering amount of money just in lost productivity, injuries, and lawsuits. But then I said, okay, what about worldwide? Because this just isn't a United States issue. We're talking $410 trillion worldwide. Okay, so this is a crisis. This isn't just something that is a here today and gone tomorrow thing, and it's been going on for quite a while. So I talked to my wife. I guess I should include that one of the most influential books for me as an entrepreneur was The Success Principles by Jack Canfield. And I really got into that, and my wife had bought a opportunity for me to go and become a instructor for that. And so I went, and part of that was to be able to show that I know how to teach the principles that I would be teaching leadership. And so I was taught, I was asked to do my part of it on 100% accountability. And so I did that, and I wrote a little PDF to go with it. And I got my certification as a Canfield instructor on the methodology. And I came home and I told my wife, I said, I need to write a book. And we've been talking about this for a while, but I really need to write a book. I don't know if you believe in coincidences or anything like that, but within 24 hours, I get a notification from Jack Canfield and his publisher. And they said, hey, we were looking at your stuff and you really need to consider writing a book. So I told him, I said, well, that's kind of funny you say that, because I just talked to my wife. So I went through the Steve Harrison group to do my book. And I found that it was probably one of the best things that I could have done. The hardest thing for me, Bill, was to change my mindset of being in law enforcement and how I would write and approach things. Because I thought this is going to be easy. I've written thousands of reports and everything. And then I started writing my book, and I had to start it over 3 or 4 times because it made perfect sense to me, but it wasn't for somebody who would read the book. They would go, I know what you're saying here, but I don't understand it. So it was a different way of thinking and having to write. And I know that you've written books, and so you understand where I'm coming from with that. But this book is there to help leaders be able to recognize, respond to, and resolve drug use in the workplace. It's to help them as a leader not only be able to address leadership principles that I feel are really important for a leader to have, but also to be able to implement those things and come into, I told you just a little bit ago that I feel that zero tolerance is a dead thing. It's not working. If it did, I wouldn't have never wrote the book. There was no reason to. What I'm looking at is teaching leaders to recognize zero blind spots, to be able to recognize and see this stuff before it happens, not being reactionary, or being in a point where we're able to recognize this to help people. This isn't something where we're trying to punish people or look for punitive damages or, let's get rid of you. Let's recognize this before it gets to that point and be able to know how to address it. And it was really well receptive with a lot of the leaders that I practiced this with. And they all agreed with me, you got to write a book, and that's what we did. And I approached you with it and had you look at some of the stuff that I was writing, and I felt honored that you were able to do that and then give me some direction as well. And you're even included in the book and in endorsing the book as well. So
Thank you.
I'm doing something right, but I think probably one of the things that was really, really cool for me was when you have somebody that's a mentor like Jack Canfield, who one encourages me to do it, but then he did a forward to this book, and it's totally different than any forward that he's done for any other book. What other book have you ever seen him do for drugs or alcohol or leadership in the workplace like that? And so that's how much he felt that this book needs to get out as well.
Well, so let me give the audience a little bit more of your background. So you founded Colorado Mobile Drug Testing, right?
Correct.
To fill a need.
Mm-hmm.
The whole time you're very entrepreneurial. So you're looking at other things, other opportunities. You start a couple of different podcasts that are ongoing, very popular. The Language of Leadership is one of them. Clearing the Haze is another one. And you're talking to people in the drug testing industry. You're talking to leaders of, leader gurus, et cetera, that are, known for their leadership training and skills and whatnot. How much did all of that, all of this experience that you're getting from talking to so many different people on a regular basis, how did that sort of factor in to like how you wrote the book and what you decided to include in the book? Because I know when I read the book, I was really impressed with the depth of information that you provided. And I thought, I've known Chuck a while now. I didn't know he was this smart, so I'm just kidding. I'm just
A
kidding.
lot of people are saying that. I don't understand.
No, but how did all of this, sort of influence your thinking?
With having been in law enforcement, one of the things that you get put into a lot of different situations, and you have to learn how to communicate. You have to learn to listen. And it's kind of like when my kids were growing up, and you being a father as well, you may not understand that. You would start talking to them, whether you're disciplining them or you're teaching them or whatever, and you'd be talking, and all of a sudden they interrupt you. And one of my quotes that I used to say to my kids all the time is, I know that you're listening to what I'm saying, but are you hearing what I'm saying? Are you listening to respond? Are you hearing to understand? And that would cause them to slow down a little bit and realize that, one, I'm giving you an opportunity to tell me how you feel and tell me how about this situation. But you need to let me talk to you so you can hear what I'm telling you. And I was seeing that a lot in the workplace. I was seeing people that, leaders that they would put into positions where, they were a great employee, stellar employee. And so they automatically think, this guy's going to be a great supervisor. They throw him in that situation. They give him no training. And now we're also telling him, you're in charge of the drug and alcohol program. God bless you. I hope it works. And and these guys would look at me like with deer in the headlights look, like, what do I do now? They know, for the most part, I got to send this guy home or I got to get a drug test. But beyond that, and then they would get the drug test and they go, does this mean this person was impaired? And I'm like, no, drug testing isn't an impairment test. It's to tell you if they're in violation of your policies and causing an unsafe environment. But if it was impairment, it would be totally different because you would see this, 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 and this. And so it was just doing that training. And as we were going along, we have plenty of people in our industry, in the drug and alcohol testing industry, that teach reasonable suspicion. And one of the concerning things that I saw is anybody can read a book and teach you about it, okay? But these individuals didn't have any practical knowledge or understanding of it. They haven't seen somebody under the influence of methamphetamine and know what that looks like, or what somebody looks like under the influence of marijuana, or even psilocybin mushrooms, which is now becoming popular. So I was able to take that element that I have, that expertise, and put it into that. So then when I go to do a reasonable suspicion class, or I go and I speak on the book and what I've done here, I know because I've actually done it. And so I'm able to paint that picture for you so you understand it. I've had individuals come up to me afterwards and say, you know what, Chuck, I saw that and I didn't know what it was until just now. And now I know. And then that scares them because they're going, how much of this have I missed that I didn't know about? So it's been, something that has been very rewarding for me to see how the book is being embraced and how people are looking at it and they're like, you need to get this out to more people. They need to know.
Yeah, I think that's one of the things that impressed me when I read an early draft of the book was how do we get a lot of people to read this? And that's really sort of, in my opinion, and I've been doing the drug testing business stuff for this will be my 36th year, dating back to my days at the U.S. Chamber of Commerce. But that's one of the things that I think as an industry we could definitely be better at, which is, getting the word out, educating people. And it's not just, organizations like NDASA and SAPA do a great job with their training and their educating, et cetera. But, we're just scratching the surface, it seems like. And so what are some of the, first of all, where can people get the book? How can we sort of market it that way through this podcast?
Oh, great. You can go to masteringtheimpairmentcode.com. You can order it from the website, or you can go to Amazon. It's on Amazon, both in a digital form and also in the book itself. I'm working on doing the Kindle version of it right now. So it'll be out as soon as I can get that all figured out and how to do that correctly. And we'll get that out for you as well.
What about an audio version of the book? Are you planning that?
Yeah, that's what I'm trying to do, is the audio version right now for Audible.
Okay.
I haven't got that down yet. I've got a pretty good setup with my things here. Just got to tweak a couple things to be able to do it from my studio here, and to be able to have it so that it works and it reads well.
So if there was, and I know there's lots of things, but if there was one or two things that you hope every reader gets out of your book, what would it be? What do you want them to walk away with?
I want them to realize that this isn't as hard as it may sound. I have a story that's in the book that I kind of relate that, because when I was learning to be a drug recognition expert, I used to come home and practice on my wife and my kids, and my kids were small enough that they thought it was pretty cool that I'm doing all this stuff with their eyes and checking them and looking for things. And, like I had told you, and I wrote in the book, look, I don't like going shopping. I don't like being in big crowds of people. And I was there with my wife one day and my kids, and we're standing there at the cash register, and I see this lady come up, and then the manager with her, and I can see already signs of impairment with this lady. And I just kind of looked at Stacy, and she gave her that look that she knew after, we've been married for 35 years now, that she knew what that look meant. I didn't have to say anything. But what I didn't realize is my 7-year-old son is sitting there watching me, going from Stacy to me to Stacy to me. And he's watching, and I could see the gears in his head just going. I'm like, oh man, what's this kid going to say? And he looked at me and he goes, Dad. And I said, yeah. He goes, she's tweaking on meth, isn't she? And I had everybody in the line behind us start laughing and coming up to him, and, how'd you know? And then they would come up to me and ask me, how'd your kid know this? And they're all seeing it too. Even the supervisor that's standing with the lady at the cashier is laughing and shaking her head as we're going through the line. But my point in sharing that with you is, if a 7-year-old kid can pick up on the subtle signs of impairment and recognize it, why can't you as a leader be able to do the same thing? And that's what this book was. It wasn't to overwhelm anybody, but to give you some base knowledge and understanding that you're confident enough to go forward and to protect your workplace and protect the people that you work with. Look, we see these guys and these team members of ours more than their own families do. We know when they walk through if there's something wrong. This book is helping you to identify if that's something wrong, is impairment or addiction or something else that we need to look at.
And when an employer reads the book and they get ideas about it, but, like you said, anybody can read a book and repeat what's in the book, but they really need to internalize it. I mean, what can they do? Is there more that you can do to help them as they have questions about some of the principles that you teach in the book?
You bet. I am doing trainings right now where I can come out and do trainings with you and your staff. I just got done doing that for an oil and gas field company out here. I was out in the middle of nowhere, man. It was like pretty desolate, and there's a lot of people out there. But I went out there and I did that, and then afterwards, I sat around for another 45 minutes, almost an hour, with these supervisors coming up to me and just telling me stories and just going, man, I love this, and so I know that if you take the time to do it and you implement the things that are in the book, it's gonna change your world. And that's my whole thing in doing that is to be able to offer that. I'm also speaking at conferences and stuff on the topic that is covered in the books and different aspects of it. I'm not trying to so much sell the book from the stage, because that's going to be frowned upon, but I want to be able to teach some of the principles within that book so that you understand the importance of it and the need for a book like that to have been written and be available to people.
So I can tell you, audience, that Chuck will be presenting at the SAPA conference in October in Phoenix. He and I are actually speaking at the exact same time. So pick whichever one of us you like the best and go hear us speak. I don't know why that happens, Chuck, that every
The
year we seem
popularity
to be,
contest. Yeah.
yeah, we're scheduled at the same time every year, it seems like.
Yeah. Yeah, they did that last year with us too. We were like, "Oh man, we're never going to see each other's presentations."
Yeah. But but let's close with this. So let's say somebody buys the book, they love what's in it, they've even heard you make a presentation, maybe they've even brought you out to their company and you've done some additional training and whatnot. But like a lot of things, it's hard to keep going, right? It's just hard to toe the line over the course of time, and that requires leadership. Of course, we could have another webinar on that, but or another podcast. But what about that company that a year from now, after they've read the book, it's been a year now, and they're struggling to keep the connection going? How can you help them?
Well, the biggest way that I'm able to help right now is through the podcast that I have with Clearing the Haze and also the Language of Leadership. That's an ongoing training that I do with individuals. I have guests on, such as yourself, and people like that. They're able to write into me. They're able to tell me, things that they're concerned about or they're challenged with, and we address it. Look, I'm not going to be arrogant enough to tell you that I have the answers for everything, but I know people. Just like you, Bill, you know people. If I don't know the answer, I can find somebody that does. And I feel I have an obligation, kind of like within doing this book as well, to share what I've been blessed with, something that I've become very proficient, very good at. I have an obligation to help other people. And it's not so much, hey, I wrote a book. As much as it is, I want to be able to give you the ability to know that business that you put together from your kitchen table and poured all your heart, blood, sweat, and tears into, and then somebody gets into an accident and they come up to you and they go, well, I was smoking weed and there's nothing you can do about it. I've had those guys come into my office and they've cried and they've shed tears and they're scared and they've had sleepless nights. If I can help that individual know that they're not going to lose everything, that there are things that we can do to help them, that is a payday for me. That is what I want. And so I think that, one, they have to have that desire to keep going because, like you said, if you just read the book and you put it to the side, it's not going to do you any good if you don't start implementing the things that you do. So I think listening to the podcast, one of the things that I've been asked to do that I'm going to be doing for the first time that I've never done is I'm going to start doing some live broadcasts on Clearing the Haze, covering different topics from the book.
Oh, great.
And having a call in, you're going to be able to interact with me live and do that on YouTube. And so then it's recorded and then people can go back to it. So I am looking at other things because, like we've talked about, this is an $81 billion crisis. And a lot of people don't even know it. They don't even realize it. And you talked about us going to Washington, D.C. and talking to our Congress people and telling them about, the reclassification of scheduling marijuana and how it's going to affect employers. And I think that's the biggest thing that people need to look at. Look at the people who are supporting that reclassification. It's not business owners. No. It's not people that it's going to affect. It's everybody else that's going to benefit financially from this. Your dispensaries, your big companies where it's all about the money. They could care less about you, your employees, or anything else. They want this to pass, and then they're going to look at you and go, it's your problem. Deal with it. I'm getting my money. It doesn't matter to me, but you're going to have to do it. But we're mandating things on employers too right now where we're telling them you cannot pre-employment drug test. You can't do this or that. And that's wrong. I totally believe that you've got to be able to allow employers to do what they feel is necessary to have their workplace be safe.
Yeah, and let me just say, I'm going to look over here for a second, audience, because I've got the book up on my screen from, from the Amazon website. I don't mind saying that the book is available for $17.99. And that's a great price for this book. I've seen the book. But it says Mastering the Impairment Code. And then underneath it says leadership strategies to recognize, respond to, and resolve drug use in the workplace. Yeah. So that's the book.
That's the book.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's just not a reference book. I didn't run it to read like a reference book, because then you're not going to read it. This is an issue, like we just talked about, Bill, that we see, and you receive calls on this every single day from
Yeah.
people dealing with this. And so I wanted them to have a lifeline. I wanted them to have something they could refer to, something that's going to
Yeah.
help them.
And I've had the Current Consulting Group since 1998, so 27 years now. And if I were to point to, say, a dozen things that have occurred over the last 27 years that truly have had a positive impact on the entire issue of drug abuse in the workplace, addressing it, deterring drug use, helping people that have a problem with a substance abuse disorder, etc. This book would be in my top 10 for sure of all the things. I mean, the SAMHSA regulations for lab-based oral fluid testing from 2019, that's on the list. This book is on the list with something like that. So, Chuck, congratulations on this book with all the success that you're having. I wholly endorse the book itself, but also your podcasts. I'll be at my desk working in the evening, and I'll have one of your podcasts come on, or I'll have your podcast on this monitor over here, and I'm working over here, and sort of double tasking with the podcast and whatever I'm working on at the time. So thank you for all the help that you've given me, for the opportunity to interview you for this podcast episode. We'll do more.
Thank you.
I would love to delve into some of the chapters of the book, like you're going to do with your own podcast, but for the people who watch our podcast, and direct them to the book and to the principles that you teach in the book. So I think it's great. Congratulations again. Thank you for joining us.
Well, thank you for having me on. It's been a pleasure.
Absolutely. So, audience, the name of the book is Mastering the Impairment Code. You can find it a lot of different places: Barnes and Noble, Amazon, or you can go to masteringtheimpairmentcode.com and buy it straight from the website as well. But I encourage you to take a serious look at it. I think you'll love the book. You won't regret purchasing it. But you gotta apply the principles, like a lot of other things. So thank you again for joining us. Check us out on all the major podcast platforms, and look at our YouTube channel as well. You'll find past episodes. And if you want to go through all the archives from the past year or so that we've been doing the podcast, you can go to currentconsultinggroup.com and find all the past episodes, including the ones that Chuck and I have done together. Thank you again for joining us. And that concludes another episode of Currently Speaking.